Hey everybody, Jason here. Just wanted to let you know that we had a couple audio issues on this episode. It shouldn't be too glaring, but there's going to be a couple times that I think Fran's track specifically is a little bit garbled, so apologies for that. We will have it fixed for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening. Hey everybody, welcome to Use Your Items, a video game podcast and blog. I'm your host, Jason, and with me is my wonderful and effervescent co-host, Francisco Martin. Francisco, how are you doing today?
I am so great. Seeing you and giving that talk, that introduction really fills me up with determination.
Oh no, we're already starting. Yes. I am full of determination, the juice that keeps me alive. Without, I guess, much ado about anything, we're talking about Undertale today. A fan favorite, cult hit? Is it a cult hit? I don't know if it's a cult hit
I would
anymore.
call it a cult classic. I will definitely. I think the memes have made Undertale more popular, seem more widespread than it actually is. I feel like.
Interesting.
Though I say that, but at the same time, Sans is in Super Smash, so maybe
What?
I'm wrong. Did you not know that? Sans is in Smash. But
What do you mean
kinda.
Sans is in Smash?
Sans
Is he an assist trophy?
No, he is one of your Mii fighters. The full costume is Sans, so you can play as Sans on Smash, but it's just a Mii fighter.
Oh my god,
They did
that's crazy.
Yeah, they did a lot of that for a bunch of different games where they're like, we don't want to create a full new character, but we still want to have this character appear in our game. Okay, how about just a cosmetic? Just a Sans cosmetic. You have a full Sans costume that you can play in Smash Ultimate.
That's really wild.
Yeah.
I guess I do remember seeing that now that you mention it.
You thought it was a meme. As everything with Undertale, everybody thinks it's a meme first before.
All right. So I feel unbelievably out of the loop with this game. I talked to a couple friends about it this week, letting them know that I played it. I did binge the game, so I beat it all last night. I stayed up to finish 2 endings, and I have never played the game before. I swear to God, I don't know what these memes that people talk about are. I legitimately have never felt more under a rock than I do with this, because I don't even really remember my experience when this game. Maybe it's better if we talk about our relationship with the game, because
Sure.
I just don't. I really am very curious. So how'd you come across Undertale? What were your thoughts when I told you let's do something shorter, let's do Undertale?
I was actually pretty darn excited. Undertale is one of those games that I have picked up and played for quite a bit. I think, spoilers, I guess, I think I've played this twice before, up to defeating Undyne and stopped playing. And it's not because I didn't like
Interesting.
it. It's just I don't know what happened. Either life happened or it didn't catch my attention as much. But I do remember having good positive feelings about the game. It was one of those things where I'm like, someday I'll go back and play it and finish it. So having this opportunity to have a deadline essentially and forcing me to finish it was a very exciting prospect for me.
Okay. Nice. That's great, actually. I'm glad to hear that you had such high hopes coming into the game. I know that from the message you sent me earlier this week that maybe that didn't go exactly as planned.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Interesting. So, what about it as a developer stood out to you? Just getting into it.
Oh my goodness. If we want to talk about it from a developer standpoint, the biggest thing, the thing that hits you like a brick is how little quality of life settings this game has for a sold released product. I'm
Right.
actually kind of baffled that it doesn't allow you to choose the size of your screen. It doesn't like it forces you to
Well,
have
you can
Z
full
and
screen
X.
it,
You
can't
can
you?
full screen it or not full screen it. You essentially
Yeah.
that's all you get. You can't choose windowed but bigger, right? Like
Yeah, I agree. The accessibility settings were something we talked about as soon as I
yeah.
loaded the game up. I ran into this, so I ended up playing the game on my Steam Deck,
Mhm.
and it was phenomenal.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. For me, it was not phenomenal from a if I put it on full screen and I ever had to click off it for any reason, it jittered my whole computer because, as you know, with full screen games, whenever you click off it, it kind of like and like it
Yeah.
resets everything. Every single time I did that, it did that. But I couldn't play it in window mode because window mode is like 640p. It's like
It's
tiny.
so small, and you're on an ultra wide too, right?
Not right now. I am on a laptop. So, but
Mm-hmm.
it takes maybe a quarter of my real estate on my screen. It's tiny. It just is pretty annoying from
I
from my
think that's very reasonable, and it's I had the same issue too with key bindings mostly.
yes, that's the other thing, key bindings.
Yeah, the fact that there's no key bindings, like there's no settings
Mm-hmm.
whatsoever. When you go there's not a colorblind mode, there is not a text size mode.
Mm-hmm.
There it is so bare bones. And
Yeah,
I understand it was a crowdfunded game in 2013,
I don't
but
100% think that that's a valid excuse. I personally feel like I've played Flash games that had more key binding and quality settings that were free.
right. Yeah, and I think that's reasonable too. I certainly think that given the popularity and the success of Undertale,
Mm,
that it's not unreasonable to think that Toby Fox and the people that he works with
mm.
could just add an update later
Yeah.
on down the line. I understand again, maybe I'm too kind
Mm-hmm.
in thinking that because it was 2015, like there's some reason that they can't do it, but at the same time, I don't know. I've played ROM hacks or fan patched versions of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic that run in super duper ultra wide with
Mm-hmm.
like AI upscaled like res like I just feel like if we can if we can do some of these things we can add key
Yeah.
binding
Yeah.
settings
Yeah.
for
Definitely.
those of us that don't have an arrow cluster. So that's my major concern. That's my major frustration. I cannot play it on my computer because I don't have an arrow cluster natively on my keyboard, and that makes it impossible to play the game because I only have access to an arrow cluster on a layer,
Yeah.
which that layer doesn't have the letter keys
Well,
on
that's
it.
where you go into the Undertale layer. You have to open up
Yeah.
Deer's I forgot the name of the
I'll open up Via and then I'll go in and I will rebind an entire new layer of my keyboard specifically to play Undertale while I hold down a key the entire time. No, it's just it's in a way so simple, and it's a game that I think is trying to limit the ways in which you can tweak and
Mhm.
play with it from a settings level,
Yeah.
because the nature of its gameplay, the nature of it physically and in many ways emotionally being a game is so important to the Ludo narrative experience of playing Undertale.
Yeah.
Because the more the game becomes a program that you can tweak and play with and you can add and you can change these settings and things like that, I think it changes how you the player feel about the game and
Mhm.
how you can relate to the game. And I will do a spoiler because I have a lot to there's a direct spoiler for that with my take on the
Mhm.
game, but I think, yeah, my relationship with Undertale is, like I said, I felt like I was under a rock.
Yeah.
I knew it was super popular. I had some friends who played it. I told a couple of my friends, like the very first day that I started playing it over the weekend, and they were like, "Oh my god, I love Undertale. It's so exciting." I was like, "Yeah, I mean, it seems fine. It seems like an RPG." Like I really didn't feel badly or strongly about
Mhm.
it on my first blush, like on my first hour of play. I thought it was extremely quirky,
Mhm.
and the quirkiness of it was just part and parcel with its relationship to Earthbound
Yeah.
and Mother 3, right? Where Toby Fox used to make ROM hacks of Earthbound and was hugely inspired by Earthbound. The game's direct influence is Earthbound, and that is a game that is traditionally known to be really quirky and a game that is also directly in reply and in conversation to Dragon Quest.
Yeah.
So I just think that it's something that I had more of a relationship with Earthbound coming into this.
Mhm.
So my first experience was like, this is quirky, this is fun. I was telling my buddy Brian, it's kind of like the Zoe Deschanel effect, and
Mm.
that if you watch too much Zoe Deschanel content back to back to back to back to back, it suddenly becomes like it all has one very distinct flavor, in my opinion. She has a very distinct acting style. She is often, I think, typecast into certain things. If you watch a lot of New Girl and then you go and watch 500 Days of Summer or something like that, and you kind of get this like, you know, manic pixie dream girl aesthetic. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to rag on Zoe Deschanel here, but that style of humor, that tongue in cheek, partially self aware, fourth wall breaking
Mhm.
humor
Mhm.
is something that really works to Undertale's success.
Yeah.
But until you're fully bought in, I do feel like it can be a little much. Like it could be a little too much candy before
Mhm.
your dinner.
I do agree that it is a little bit of not an acquired taste, but I feel very strongly that this is one of those games that you only need to give it 2 hours. If you're
Okay.
not hooked by 2 hours, then just stop. It's not gonna get. It's not.
I mean, you could beat the game in another 30 minutes depending on how you're playing it though.
I told Jason right before we recorded that it took me around 4.5 hours to beat the game, and there is a very
Wild.
specific reason as to why.
That's just
Uh,
insane. So it took me 9.5 hours to beat this game, and the vast majority of it was done from 6:30 p.m. last night until about 4 o'clock in the morning this morning. I stayed up, and it stopped hurting after maybe 8 p.m. So let's get into it. Let's sort of let's do a little spoiler marker here. So if you don't want Undertale spoilers moving forward, this is a good place to hop off. Thank you for joining us. Come back when you play the game or you feel ready to not have it spoiled if that's the case. I know it's a really important game to a lot of people out there, and I certainly don't want to ruin the experience. It is a game that if you're interested, if you do kind of gets its hooks into you in that first hour, 2 hours, it's a really rewarding experience
yeah,
to play through.
exactly.
It
Definitely is.
it's not like other video games in the way that it addresses its plot and narrative. So
Mhm.
this is your station. This is where you're getting off, and we will see you at the end. Thanks for joining us so far. So, Fran, you beat the game in what, 4 hours?
4.5 hours. I think it's 260 minutes, so that's 120. 120 is 240. So yes, 4.5 hours.
Okay. So we know that there's multiple endings to the game. There's what, 93 is what they say. I think that's the number that I hear a lot.
Sure.
Is that there's 93 endings to the game.
Sure.
And I get it too. You know, it's one of those games where minute differences between endings dictates it being an ending. This is the Chrono Trigger effect, right?
Yeah.
Of there's 21 endings in Chrono Trigger, but 11 of them are iterations on Lavos killing you.
You chose the chocolate milk or the frappe at the end of the. You're drinking a different drink at the very end. Wow, that's crazy different ending.
Right, exactly. And that's fine. I appreciate that. I'm a huge Chrono Trigger fan and love that game to death, and I appreciate what it did. And that was playing with time travel to achieve that effect. whereas Undertale's not really playing with time travel to do that. So there's a couple ways to play the game, and it does beg the question: how does the game want you to play it? So
Yes, that is the key thing that's the problem.
the problem, interesting. That's
That's
not. I would not use that word.
it
But
is
okay, tell me your experience.
so my let me explain to you how I played the game, I guess, to explain how I got to this point.
Set the scene.
So the scene for me was essentially I was trying to enter it as a person who has barely heard anything about Undertale, and I'm just gonna play it as a normal RPG, just gonna have fun with it, which I think is the point of the game. The point of the game is to enter it as I don't know, I didn't like I knew going in that a pacifist run was possible. But I'm going to enter it thinking that I don't know if a pacifist run is possible. Maybe there are some enemies you just have to kill and stuff like that. So I entered into it like that, and I quickly developed my flowchart, so to speak, of how I was going to enter combat. For me, the flowchart was as follows. Step 1. Is it easy or logically... Can you figure out logically how to defeat this enemy without attacking them? So if it's a dog, pet the dog. Or if it's a tsundere plane, I'm gonna flirt with her.
I love that
Yeah, it's great. I love
much.
So stuff like that. So if there is a certain level of logic, that's something that I need to talk about separately afterwards. That doesn't. The reason that there's a flowchart there is because there's a mechanic of the game that I do not like. We will touch that later. If that doesn't happen, start attacking. Once you start attacking, if the opportunity presents itself that you can give them mercy or escape or run or whatever, I will choose that unless they are one attack away from dying. If they've wasted my time to the point, if they've attacked me, if they've brought me to 1 health, if they've dealt so much damage to me that we're both at the doorstep of death, I'm not going to do the dumb MC thing of, I finally defeated you, but I won't kill you. And then you turn your back and they shoot you. Like, oh my God. I'm not going to be that guy. So
you have standards.
I have standards.
You have rules. I
have rules. So that was my modus operandi. Every combat, I did that. Problem is, the way that the game, I think, expected you to, at first, fight Papyrus, is that I bet that 99% of the people either get captured by him, so in other words, you hit 1 HP, and he says, I'm not going to kill you, I'm going to capture you.
Right.
Or, you get him down to 1 HP, and he says... okay, let's not fight anymore, and you give mercy. I got him down to 1 HP.
Oh no.
I have 50% health, and he said mercy, and I was like, nah, I have standards. And I killed off Papyrus.
Oh my God, you killed Papyrus on your... But what'd you do with Toriel?
That's the thing.
What do you mean, that's the thing?
What did I do with Toriel? I think I let Toriel live because Toriel was, like, much sooner was obvious that she wasn't attacking me. Like, I was just staying in one spot and the things would go around me. Like, if it was obvious that they were trying to, like, save me, then I wouldn't attack them. God. Papyrus wasn't letting up at any point. They were still attacking me and still damaging me and doing all these different things. So I'm like, okay, so you are trying to kill me. There's no point where my health was so low that he was going, I'm not going to kill you, except I didn't hit that spot. I had hit that spot before in my other playthroughs. This is the only playthrough out of the 3 in which I killed Papyrus. And I think, and that's the problem.
What a gamer.
The problem is, if you kill Papyrus, you get absolutely no more cutscenes throughout the whole game. The game is such a slog and so boring.
Really?
You do not get any more... Sans does not show up ever again until the very end. Undyne, even if you save her with the water cup, that's the last time you see Undyne. You don't get her date. You don't get any of that. There's so much stuff that I remembered from my first and second playthrough that just did not happen at all. And I think it's because the game expects you that if you kill Papyrus, you're going through a genocide run. But I wasn't. I was going through a neutral run, and I got the neutral ending. But it was such an unfortunate. The way that I've been really thinking about how to explain this feeling, it feels like playing a sequel to a game or watching a sequel to a movie and being very disappointed in it. Except in this case, the sequel is the same game. Like,
Oh
I feel
man.
so nostalgic for those first 4 hours up to Undyne. The first two times I played it, going out on that date with Undyne, doing sand stuff and everything like that.
Yeah.
That once I noticed, like, once I was in hour 3 and I noticed that I had skipped all these cutscenes, I was like, well,
You're literally just playing the game. There's
I'm
no character interaction.
no character interaction, no character development, no anything until the very end. At the very end, there's a very spooky scene where Sans asks you, "Oh, if you had the power to save people, would you use it or whatever?" And I was like, "Yes." And then his eyes turn black, and it goes like very very jump scary. It's just,
Yeah.
why did you kill my brother? And then the screen just goes black, and you're like, oh, is this the Megalovania time? And it's like, oh, no, it's not. He just leaves. Like, you don't even
Mhm.
get Megalovania if you kill his brother, which I was like, oh, maybe I'll get to listen to that song and find Sans.
It's
It'll be fun.
so weird. Like you got such a unique. I feel like you found like this weird
Yes.
middle of the road ending.
Yes. Which is
And
probably the worst one. I bet that this is just the most boring.
I don't know, genocide runs look extremely boring.
Oh, really?
And yeah, so I think what you are bring us towards is the magic trick of the game, right? Of how it forces you to play with it and how it expects you to play with it and how it plays with this idea of games and how we interact with their stories. And I can see why it would be so boring, but it creates this scenario where you, the player, are killing characters or not killing characters. You have you have an inner logic that you're following in your particular playthrough.
Yeah.
And as you're going through this game and you're finding the experience to be super boring, but you're going through it anyway because you want to get to the end, and you're making these choices and these decisions, your actions are so reflective of what's actually happening in the world. Is that it's it that and this is more obvious, I think, in a genocide run where you you become so numb. The act of doing it, the act of playing the game has become so boring because you are no longer attached to any of these characters. You aren't in many ways, you're not even sort of in league with Flowey, right?
Yeah.
The trick in a genocide run is that you become just like Flowey.
Yeah.
Because you become empty and you lack empathy and you've just it there's no point to it anymore.
And that's why, and this is the reason I called it a problem, so to speak, is because I only killed two bosses. The only bosses I killed was Papyrus and the mech Metaton. I killed Metaton because following my logic of, if I can't logically figure out how to defeat you in a way that doesn't require, I don't know which actions I need to do for you to show mercy or for me to spare you or anything like that. So I just killed him. Even the last guy, even Flowey, I ended up sparing and everything because I was like, yeah, well, yeah, the game ended by this point. It doesn't matter to me. So yeah, sure, spare.
You did Papyrus so dirty.
Yeah, and I honestly, and the reason I keep calling it a problem, never explaining why I call it a problem, is that as a developer, one of the basic tenets of when you're designing a game is choosing your players and deciding kind of like your flavors and what play styles will fight different types of players and playing to those strengths. And I know that this is very much me saying, "Oh, I wish there was even more like diverging paths and more story." But I'm so disappointed that there was no conversations with Sans until the very end about oh, where did Papyrus go or something like that. Undyne just never mentions Papyrus ever again or anything like that. And that's something I kind of expected. And I think this is just me knowing that there were 93 different endings. I kind of expected the game to have a you kill Papyrus and feel sorry for killing Papyrus, and
Yeah.
therefore there is some different ending of like, oh, you kill Papyrus, but then on you don't kill anybody that I thought would be, and it just did not exist. And for
Right.
me, that seems like such a given that Papyrus is like the big first boss. Toriel is a boss, but Toriel is kind of like the tutorial boss. It's kind of doesn't really count as much for me personally.
Yeah, Toriel is interesting as the in the idea that she is a tutorial
Mm,
boss, specifically in the space that if you kill her
mm,
and you start the you potentially start the beginnings of a pretty tragic run
mm.
and you go to restart the game, that's like the gotcha moment for the vast majority of players, as I understand it, is you go through the beginning and you kill a bunch of stuff, but you're just like moving through the game. You kill a frog when you see a frog because I'm playing an RPG and that's what I do. And everything's kind of weird and funny. And then you get to Toriel and Toriel says, "No, I'm not letting you leave." And you kill Toriel. And then you feel really bad because
Yeah.
she's like really sad. And then Flowey makes you feel like shit. And you say, fuck it. And then you turn the game off. You start a new game. As I understand it, the game clips a save state of what you had done,
Mm,
and then Flowey starts taunting you from the very beginning,
yeah.
in his own way, in their own way, for you know, uh, for you being unable to commit
Yeah.
and thinking that you can just reset time, you can just reset the timelines.
Which is something that you mentioned that you were saying, oh, but this game doesn't have time travel. But it actually does kind of have time travel in
It
that
kind of
you
does.
you and Flowey have the power of reset, is I think what the internet calls it. Essentially, the power to just go back to a previous save state and remember
Yeah.
what happens from save state to save state.
Yes. So as I watched a really great video last night that helped me sort of organize some of my thoughts about this. I would highly recommend it to anyone. Let me see if I can. I think it was Distorted Timelines. Let me see if I can find it. It's Tangled Realities
Mm.
by Andrew Cunningham. Fantastic video, great creator. Definitely suggest it. And Andrew brings up this idea that Flowey and the player character, you,
Mm.
have the power of determination. And the power of determination is quite literally the ability to make a save
Yeah.
and to load a save in the game. And so you and Flowey both exist within the game space of I'm in the game, I'm playing the game, I have to be a part of it, and Flowey's a part of it, but you can both step outside of the game
Mm.
and create new saves. You can load stuff, you can do a reset, whatever you need to do. And their thesis leads towards the ways in which you become more and more like Flowey
Mm.
the more you play the game. If you play the game as intended, as RPGs are often intended, where wow, I love this, I'm going to play this so many times. Now I'm going to do a fun run where I kill everybody. It's like, well, you're doing that because you don't care about it anymore.
Yeah.
In a way that you care so much about it that it's now sort of wrapped back around that now it's just now it is a game to you. So
Mm.
it does this it does this metafictive magic trick where you're you're in the game, you've suspended your disbelief, so you want to keep everybody alive, but you love the game and you've done it so much that you say, "Oh, I want to play it in a different way." Well, it's not a game anymore,
Mm.
except that it is a game because Flowey recognizes that you see it as a game,
Mm.
and you kind of keep getting incepted down and down because you're either with Flowey and following their same problem of they've become detached from the world in their case, because they no longer have a physical corporeal body and their soul is trapped in something that can't feel,
Mm.
or in the case of the player, these characters that you fall in love with, arguably,
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 unfortunately, unless you kill
are
Papyrus.
unless you kill Papyrus. These characters that you find so quirky or interesting, uh, they just become toys. They just become playthings.
Mm.
I mean, Andrew Cunningham's video is great. I definitely recommend digging into that a little bit more. But
That's interesting that he says that you have this power, because I kind of feel like at some point, yeah, I can kind of agree with that, but at the other point, I can also just play a devil's advocate of, if that was the point to give you that power, then why do you only have one save state? Like, why can't you just go back and you continue saving, you save, but whenever you load, it shows you every single save you've had in throughout the whole game.
yeah,
And you can go to other, like, you can, and then it remembers to when you go to a different one, maybe kind of like chess with 5D dimensional time, and
yeah, I've
like
played
that
that.
type of game. Like,
I see your argument. I
maybe
see
it's
the
too
point.
difficult to develop. Well, definitely it would be very difficult to
I don't
develop.
I don't even think that, like, that almost gives me, like, what's that game, Super Hot, where like you can like
Mhm.
zoom in and rewind and like do all those cool like stylish action movie things. But I think the game is a video game, and it is hyper aware that it is a video game that is meant to be played, and that's what allows it to do this magic trick. So not allowing you to choose between save states or manipulate things like that, I think in a game that's as short as this
Mhm.
is pretty
4.5
reasonable,
hours,
especially.
right?
I'm sorry.
4.5 hours, right?
Right. I mean, so I was watching a genocide run just to understand what happens in that playthrough, and the ways in which the game really fucks with you when you make those choices. And that playthrough is 2 hours and 40 minutes long.
Mm.
The YouTube video is 2 hours and 40 minutes long, and there's a lot of sped up moments in there.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's probably maybe 3.5 hours. I mean, I have to say, I just think that the way in which the game asks you, the player, to interact with the metafiction of Undertale
Which
as the
is,
player is a really incredible feat. It's not an easy thing, I think,
yeah.
to do metafiction in a way that is easy
Mhm.
to digest,
Mhm.
and it is, what am I trying to say? To do metafiction in a way that is popular
Yeah.
or enjoyable for many, many people.
Well, what a great segue to my second one of another issue that I had with the game. So I'm 4 hours in, 4 and 15, fighting Asgore, fighting Flowey, and the is it possible to have nostalgia for a game that you didn't even finish before? Like, the
Oh wow,
nostalgia,
that's a
the
that's a
nos-
deep that's a really good. Oh my god, we're gonna go way off track. That's
the
Keep
nos-
going.
the nostalgia I had for those first two half playthroughs, and knowing that there's so many different endings, and honestly, so one of my favorite times in anime is whenever they bring the OP remixed as the final battle music at the end of the series.
Right.
The best example of this, Gurren Lagann, bringing Roro, fight the power, Liberame from hell, merging those
Yeah.
together, and it's like, oh, my hairs are standing on right now.
Incredible leitmotif.
Incredible leitmotif. God damn, like, I wish this was recorded so you could see my
Your
goosebumps.
goosebumps.
Um,
I loved Gurren Lagann.
so, and I had a rational experience in Undertale where if I was invested in this, I would have felt exactly the same, and I would still have goosebumps. And it is when you die to Flowey and the text in bold letters shows up, "Stay determined," and I was like, God dang it! I wish I was
I think in a
invested.
way
I
you
wish I had played that version where I'm trying to save my friends and I'm trying to whatever, but there's nobody here that wants me to succeed. There's nothing in this version of the story that I'm playing that makes me want to fail. Like I want to stay determined. I would have probably stopped playing after I realized, and I would have stopped in the same place after I realized there's nothing more for me. Like I essentially am gonna get less than from those other playthroughs. I would have just stopped and not continued on playing. But I really do feel like that would have been a situation where I would have felt that way. And the reason I say that this is a good segue is because right when the game ended, I immediately felt I want to replay this game. I want to replay it again and play it correctly.
The magic trick worked.
The magic trick worked. However, and this is, I think, what we can talk about next, I couldn't bring myself to do it. And the reason that I'm assuming that video of the genocide run has fast forward is the game is too slow. It is so slow to go from point A to point B. I just thought about, like, if I restart this game, there's so much dead space moving from point A to point B and having to move there slowly, trying to get there. If this was an emulation where I could speed it up, maybe I would have played it again. But it was so slow to get there, especially, and this is not even considering that I would have to go through a pacifist run. So destroying enemies or defeating enemies is even going to take longer. And finally, this is something you asked about, how development and all these things. I personally, and this is an opinion, I think the combat...
No. An opinion.
The combat is a bit of a miss for me. I love combat, turn-based combat that on your off turn asks something to do with you. I love Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. I love not Bravely Default. What is this game? The Child of Light. I love Child of Light as well.
It's a popular one.
But I think the concept of this one, where you're a heart, you're moving, it's kind of like a bullet hell type game and all these things. I am primed to love that type of... I love those types of games and those types of mechanics. But you move so slow, and it is such a, like, come on, can you just move faster? I didn't feel like I was ever in control of my heart. It felt like I was instead blowing on a piece of paper to like move it from place to place. It never felt like I was the heart. I felt like, come on, move to the right, move to the left, and like it never felt satisfying. I would have liked if the game was harder and the movement was better. Because I imagine that the movement, the speed of the movement, if you make it faster, if you make it more snappy and inertia, the game would be too easy. Okay, fine. Put more bullets, put more crazy stuff. Make me feel like a badass. It feels like a chore right now, for me personally. And that is why I couldn't go back and replay it. I just went onto the wiki and YouTube to just watch videos. Because I just was like, I'm not gonna spend time replaying this. I don't want to.
I do think that spending time on the wiki and on YouTube watching additional runs of this game is at this point kind of a quintessential experience.
Yeah.
Because you have players who certainly will never do a genocide run themselves. Yeah. I do wonder, did you try it to do another playthrough and then fall off? You didn't even try?
I didn't even try. Just the memories of like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to do the fake puzzles that Toriel has for me. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to
yeah.
I've been talking a lot, so I want to give you some time to talk, but there is something else as well that was pushing me away from not doing it.
Right. I think, okay, so I would say, I feel like if you had tried it again, you might be shocked or surprised by how quickly you can play through it when you know the answers to all the puzzles. Why are you muted?
No, I'm not muted. I whispered that's the problem. What puzzles are we talking about? Are we talking about the world puzzles?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about those puzzles.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about the puzzles of figuring out how to ask for mercy or spare people.
Oh, yes.
Which is my
you
next
mean when you're
problem.
in the act menu?
Yes, which is my next problem with the game. I love quirky jokes. I love Sans dad jokes. The jokes, the humor really jives with me. I like it. I
It
would
works
if
for
this
you.
was a show, I'd be jiving with it. If this was a comic book, I'd be jiving with it. It's I was talking this with my girlfriend, and personally, it's the lol xd so random humor, and I honestly do like that to a certain
Yeah.
extent. I enjoy it. I'm not saying that as I know a lot of people say that derogatorily, like,
No.
oh, you're making fun of this type of humor. No, I really enjoy that type of humor. The problem I have with that type of humor,
Widowy.
wittily, Fwog. First enemy is Fwog.
Flog it.
the the problem I have with that humor is with that humor is affecting is punishing me for not choosing the right random choice. I liked some of the enemies where I can kind of deduce and logic what I needed to do next to kind of spare them.
Right.
But there were some of them where it was the option was like none of these options make any sense. It is literally I need to literally need to do trial and error to get
Yeah.
these right. I don't like lol xd so random when it is implemented into the mechanics of the game in such a way that I'm gonna get punished if I don't choose the right one. And by punishment, the punishment isn't huge. The punishment is you potentially can lose life because you're gonna get attacked. Or but bigger, even bigger still, it wastes your time. It's more time that you need to take now for the game just to trial and
Yeah.
error through it. So while I
I
love the idea of the act
yeah.
and I love the idea of a pacifist run, I don't think the execution was right on all the monsters. I don't like having to guess and guess because some of them you can't defeat by act. Some of them, Papyrus, you don't defeat by using the act command. You just need to attack them until they're down to 1 health, or they attack you until you're down to 1 health. So it doesn't.
That's you have to spare him.
You have to spare him after
You
he's
don't
tried to
use
kill
the act
you.
menu.
Yeah.
You go to spare and you just hit spare. You just have to let the fight play out, and eventually,
Oh, is that
uh,
another way of doing it? If you just click spare
I'm
over and
pretty
over again?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, just like in the Toriel fight. Although I think, yeah, I think that's what I did. I don't really remember. He caught me the first time, and then I think I figured it out after that. I I see where you're coming from, and I understand your perspective. I really don't agree. I think that the pacifist playthrough is challenging,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's kind of weird. I do kind of get a sense of like the Miyazaki of it all, right? Where the game's asking you to play, and I'm talking Dark Souls.
Oh, okay.
Maybe this is a rand. I'm not talking about
Yeah, I was like,
Studio Ghibli. I'm talking about Dark Souls. So, in the sense that the game is asking you to is letting you play it in a number of different ways.
Mhm.
You can do this in Dark Souls, in Elden Ring, in maybe in everything but Sekiro.
yeah,
Sekiro's kind of asking you to play it in one way. That being said, Undertale says you can play this in a few different ways. There's a lot of it. The game is interested in how you are going to play it and will respond to you in kind.
Mhm.
And the challenge of figuring out how to do things in terms of pacifism was at sometimes I think a little frustrating.
Mhm.
And I think that where it is maybe where maybe it's bouncing off for you is that it doesn't have this treadmill effect of I've mastered some skills
yeah,
and I can apply those skills because
yeah,
when you say like XD random stuff, like it is just kind of like, what do you know about this character? Have they given you any clues, or is it just you died and you have to do it again?
yeah.
And I totally understand. I can totally recognize that that's
Because and to go a
frustrating.
little bit about the Miyazaki and the Dark Souls and all these different games. In those games, I feel like yeah, there's a bunch of different play styles, and some play styles are harder, some play styles and all these different things. But at the end of the day, it's your skill. You can play the hardest version of the game, and it's up to you and your skill to rise up to that challenge. My problem, and this is just a me as a player, I don't find trial and error without any skill to be challenging, it's just boring for me personally. Like I
But
can
all of those
play
options give you more dialogue with the characters that are in the humor that you like, no?
sometimes, sometimes
Sure.
no, sometimes it's just that was the wrong answer.
Right.
Lol,
Nothing happens.
nothing happens. Like
The
it's
dog picks up the stick. The dog puts down the stick.
yeah,
The dog's very excited. It's yeah, I see what
it's
you're saying.
there's this level of I wish in these other games I am very into old school platformers, and there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of dang it, how was I supposed to know about that? But it always feels like it's on you for not having react. Like you could have dodged it. You could have. You can play it. Just get to the next room, die immediately, memorize the room, and then just put the inputs so that way it's you've memorized and you continue. Or you can play it as okay, I'm in a new room. I'm gonna quiet like look at the room, try to dodge everything, and there is
Yeah.
some level of you can use skill to get through it. You don't just need to do trial and error, but over time, trial and error does help you. I don't feel like in a multiple choice environment that is much of a very helpful. Maybe if there
Okay.
was more of there's a few battles that during the you're getting attacked phase you had to do something. Uh,
Right, right.
if there were maybe more of those, so that way I feel like I'm getting challenged while I'm trying to figure out what's up with this person, this character, and everything like that, I would be more into it. But the fact that it is just a menu where I just select something and then I either am going to get to progress, which you don't know if you get to progress. You can assume if they feel happier and that you are progressing. But there's some characters that that's not true. The spider boss, I paid her a lot of money because I was like, oh, this will like I have so much money. I bet that once you go bankrupt, she'll go feel sorry for you and spare you or whatever. I
Mm-hmm.
gave her all my money and she still kept on attacking me. I was like,
Yeah,
okay, I guess
that
never
was a tough
mind.
one. But I think that the game got you
Mhm.
to interact with this mini boss in a unique way by
Sure.
saying, okay, like I didn't think to do that at all. I literally just used that ability to get her to I would buy something to reduce her damage when I knew
The next attack was a
the
big one.
pet was
Yeah.
coming. Because I just like I had a very hard I had to do that boss a few times. I had a really difficult time with it
Yeah.
for whatever reason, and that's just how I did it. And then eventually, the spiders from the first level, from the very first bake sale that you bought a donut from,
Mhm.
call her and say, "Oh, they're cool. Never mind," and then the fight just ends, and she lets you go. And I do take your meaning, and I
Mhm.
see where you're coming from. Where it is often the case that you don't know what to do in these menus, as opposed to it's very obvious how to attack.
Mhm.
Right? You just line the bar up
Yeah.
with the hole in the middle of the screen. I think that for me personally, what the game did was created this completely alternate way to play that rewarded me by showing me a completely different side of the story.
Mhm.
And unlike Elden Ring, right, where I can play with all my spirit ashes, I can play heavy weapons, I can play ranged, I can play with I can dual wield shields. At the end of the day, my interaction with that game is I swing something very large,
Mhm.
usually, or very quickly, and then the thing that I'm swinging it at dies.
Mhm.
Or I cast magic. It doesn't matter if I cast 1,000 magic spells or I swing, a Game of Thrones sword at, at Godric
Mhm.
100 million times. If I've killed Godric 1,000 times, at the end of the day, he dies. I get his soul and I move on.
Mhm.
Whereas if I get to spare a stupid little bird in the snow, if I spare Snowdrake and he keeps telling me stupid jokes, like I would have never got that experience
Mhm.
from doing the battle. So there's this reward aspect of it to me of I'm so interested in the characters and I'm
Mhm.
so interested in what the game does. And at times it's tedious and it can be a little boring. I think that's the case too in I to me that's just kind of like that happens in games.
Mm.
I was not super turned off by it. Recently I've been playing like God of War Ragnarok.
Mm.
I think that game's combat is pretty boring sometimes. And it's so obviously laid out that I'm like, okay, this is a room where I have to do a fight.
Yeah.
And it's like I just like can we just move the story along until you give me another wheel on my car that does something different, until I get a new ability or power. And when Undertale lets me interact with these characters that I come to really appreciate, and like they're just so weird and stupid and like derpy, and
I guess
I get I don't know. I so loved my time with the game because it felt very unlike other games that I played. And my experience, my training in grad school especially, was focused on a lot of like modernism and postmodernism literature. And postmodernism is when we really start to see metafiction kind of take off.
Yeah.
This is where the House of Leaves of the worlds reside, and this is where there's a fantastic novel by Italo Calvino, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler, and it's very much a story that is interested in how stories are told and how books are used to tell stories. And for me to have that experience in a game really drove home the physicality of playing a game, the physicality of spending this time in this place. And I think for a lot of people, that's what makes Undertale so heartwarming and so endearing, is that it really peels back that layer of suspension of disbelief. It peels back that fourth wall and kind of invites you and says, it's okay to be in this fandom. Like we love you too, and you love us, and that's so normal. And it's a game that's excited and interested to be in that space.
Yeah.
As opposed to one where it's always a parasocial relationship with a game like this, with the fandom, but it's a game that's so hyper aware of the fact that you are a player driving Frisk, and maybe Papyrus and Sans and Asgore and whoever else Temmie, God, I love Temmie, don't recognize that Frisk has a player behind them. Flowey does. And there's this constant ebb and flow and back and forth between the player and Flowey, both being very aware that Flowey's speaking to you, not to Frisk, not to the character that you're driving. And having that ability, I mean, he is, in a way, speaking to the character. Because the character is the one who has determination, but...
Apparently Sans also is aware. And that's why he's so... he doesn't care about anything. Because he's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, this is going to get reset over and over again. It doesn't. I see. So that's why he's so like, whatever.
So aloof.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense.
I agree with everything that you're saying. As a textbook, I'm reading this, I'm analyzing it, and that's why I was able to realize that ending. Oh, that's how I would have felt if I was an ingrained player. Oh, this is how this would have worked really well if I was an ingrained player. The problem is that it didn't catch me, and I wish that it's kind of like, and it's not to say that I'm like I need to have some kind of challenge of combat. Like, let's say The Walking Dead, the game. That game is all about just talking with people.
The Telltale games?
The Telltale games.
Oh my god, what a throwback.
Yeah,
that's like right? Dude, you just hit me with the Walking Dead jump scare in 2023. I haven't thought about a Telltale game in... Oh my god, I'm sorry, we need to... Can you table that thought cuz what happened? What was going on in the world that Telltale games were the biggest fucking thing? It was so... I remember playing the Borderlands Telltale game, and it slapped. It whipped ass. Like, the game was... It was better than most of the DLC for Borderlands 2.
Yeah.
And, like...
From what I've heard, Telltale, the problem was... This is going to be a 5-minute short in between our other episodes.
Yeah.
So, from what I've heard, Telltale, there was 2 major problems. One of them is very easy management. This management was just not that...
Oh, internally in the studio.
Yeah. they just kept on getting new projects and new things, like without talking to like, do we even have the head count to continue to make 5 different games at the same time, and that's why they missed a bunch of deadlines. That was number one. And number two was that the engine that they were using was something that they just put together in like a month, just to
Holy
like put
shit.
together a game, and then that
Oh
game
my god.
happened to be the Wolf Among Us, I think. It was one of their early games that was just
Oh,
a like knockout success, and so they started getting a bunch of like, we want you to make a game, and they just didn't have time to redevelop that engine. So every single game they would come out with, the engine would run slower and be crappier, and that's why all Telltale games look the same, because they were using the same engine that they created in like a month, like in a very short amount of time. So each successive game that they were making was taking longer and longer and longer to make, from what I've
that's
heard.
that's pretty sad. I'm sorry to hear that because they were such a moment in time.
Yeah,
I'm trying to figure out what that game was called. It's
the Wolf
one of
Among
my.
Us, or
It's not. I don't think
the
it's
Game
Wolf
of
Among
Thrones
Us.
one. They did a Back to the Future one.
Yeah, they did. One of a very very good friend of mine, Anthony. Shout out Anthony, is really into those werewolf games. He always
Mhm.
recommends them to me.
Haven't played
And
them. Heard
actually,
of really good
I'm
stuff.
looking at the Steam page for the Telltale definitive series, The Walking Dead, which I guess is all 4 seasons,
Mhm.
400 days. The Walking Dead Michonne, 50 hours of gameplay across 23 episodes, blah blah blah. And there's people streaming it live now, so
Wow, it's still going. It's still going, baby.
it's still here. Yeah, it's I guess for me, I was kind of coming at it. That's super interesting. I did not know all that
Mhm.
about the game engine and the mismanagement of the studio. It is a shame to hear that, but it was such a specific and unique time in I feel like in video games
Mhm.
too, because on one hand, like when those games are coming out, I feel like there weren't nearly as many indie games as there are now.
Yeah, that game came
And
out 2010, maybe.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I wonder if we even had Steam Greenlight at that point. We must have had Greenlight,
I don't
but
know
it was
even.
probably super early. Like it was like opt-in beta,
Mm-hmm.
and um, they, yeah, it was just like there weren't. I just feel like there were less games. Maybe this is also maybe a separate side note, but I just feel like there's so many fucking games right now, and I don't know if it's just like everybody's just publishing shit that they've been working on since the pandemic in
Oh,
2020.
that could be. That could be.
And so it's just like everybody has shit that's releasing, or they push stuff off to dodge this release date or that release date. But I just feel like there's so many fucking games today in September 28th, to the year of our Lord 2023, that it just feels impossible to keep up. We're playing through these games. I play almost nothing else.
Mm, mm.
I play Magic the Gathering, which is a bigger problem and probably why I don't play other games. But I play Magic the Gathering, and I haven't picked up Final Fantasy 16. I haven't
Oh
picked
my god!
up.
Wait, you? I thought you did. I thought you had
Oh no,
finished
I
that.
have it. I have it.
Oh
I'm
my
like 20
god!
hours in. I haven't finished it,
I
and I
that
haven't gone back to it
that for me is
since.
Tears of the Kingdom. I played like 2 hours of it and I haven't gone back to it because
Yeah,
I'm like, but
I
that's a
know.
me problem. That's because I don't want to. I want to play it on a big screen while I'm sitting on my
Yeah,
couch. You know, I
I
don't
don't
want to
blame
play
you.
it handheld, so that's a me
I don't blame you. I also have that game. My Switch died, which is my excuse, but
thing. Mm-hmm.
it's like I can solve the problem. And yeah, I just feel like there's so many games, and like Telltale games came out to bring this all back around, and I think this is relevant. So it's not a full departure. It's not a
No,
full step.
it's got to be a complete departure, so that way we can release this separately. What are you? I don't even know what you're talking. We're in a time loop. We're in a
No, no,
separate
no, no.
piece of
We're not in a
dimension.
time loop. I can tie this in.
Okay.
Telltale games represent a really unique period of time in video game storytelling.
Yeah.
And that style of game was difficult to replicate for
Yeah.
other studios. It was very unique in its storytelling because it basically, here it's kind of a bad, this is maybe a bad thing to say, but it got normies into visual novels, which
I,
normies didn't know that they wanted to be into visual novels. until Telltale Games came out. And that being said, it was not a fucking pipeline to visual novels, because I don't think the people who were binging episodes of The Walking Dead, and then they had to play the Telltale Games.
Okay, yeah.
They are not playing Paranormasight in 2023.
Yeah.
They are not playing 13 Sentinels or
playing,
The
Disco
Murder of
Elysium.
Sonic the Hedgehog, or Disco Elysium even, which is a CRPG, right? So it didn't really make this pipeline, but what it did was create the sense of, oh, I remember choose your own adventure stories.
Yeah.
And this is that writ large. Like, oh my God, look at what you can do. You can do this in a video game. This is so cool. And it's the same, and this is exactly what's happening in Undertale, right? Is we're showing the RPG player who's played Earthbound, who's played Chrono Trigger, who's played Super Mario RPG, who's played, I mean, at this point, Final Fantasy X, right? Who's played all of these Final Fantasy VII, Ocarina of Time, who's played these like seminal RPGs that have, some of them have multiple endings, some of them let you interact with the story in unique ways, and Undertale is maybe one of the first ones that come out of this space and say, okay, but the story is yours to write. You decide by the way that you play this game what is going to happen.
Yeah.
And that is just like how an Undertale, how a Telltale game goes, where you are allowed to write the story as you see fit, but the story is confined in a very strict box, as opposed to a game like Undertale that says, if you spend more time with me, if you think about more about how I am operating as a game, as a writer, as a developer, as Toby Fox has programmed me to operate, I will yield more and more.
Yeah.
It takes the metafictiveness of, I'm a player making choices for characters in this game, and it zooms out. It pulls you out of just the driver's seat of, ha ha ha, I'm in my fun Baldur's Gate game, and I'm going to kill all of the goblins in the goblin camp instead of saving them or talking to them. Isn't this fun? And it pulls you out. Now this is getting crazy. I'm gonna get into Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, this is getting my and the reason I brought The Walking Dead as a seminal work piece, because I do agree with practically everything you've said. And I do agree that Undertale, in a vacuum, as a it's kind of like what I would consider to be like Shakespeare or some older works where I'm like,
you're trying
to and I'm like, I understand
to get me
this.
fucked up.
I'm understanding this. I am analyzing this, and I get it. I'm just not really ingrained in this or entertained by this. And that's what I feel kind of like with Undertale. And the reason I bring up The Walking Dead is because The Walking Dead is essentially practically that whole piece of, you can choose to spare people, you can choose to do the X, Y, or Z, you can choose to do all these different things. And it's mostly pretty much a menu simulator. You're just choosing multiple choice, right? Like, it's pretty much kind of like the act of Undertale.
Okay.
But in Walking Dead, I'm so into it. I am so like, I feel like my decisions have weight. I feel like it's not wasting my time. It feels like, even, it's very meta gamey, but even the top left showing up saying Clementine will remember that is such a like strong like feedback loop of, oh my God, what have I done? And I never feel like I had that with Undertale. It took way too long for Undertale to make me feel like, oh my God, what have I done? Like Papyrus, it took me 2 hours later to finally be like, oh, I guess I shouldn't have killed Papyrus. And it's 2 hours of like boring, of like,
I feel like you really just like you
I
found
shot
like
myself in the foot. Yeah, I really did.
I feel like you found like the worst way to do it. It's just such a shame. Like I get what you're saying. Like, I feel the same way when I do something in Baldur's Gate and it's like Karlach approves, and it's like, it's such a visceral, like almost like it's such a visceral form of feedback that it's almost breaking immersion.
Yeah. But like that. I'm okay with a game breaking immersion to give you that visceral feedback. And you mentioned how like Walking Dead is pretty structured in its different things. There's something that I think it's we're kind of like in the downturn of this. Another side. This is another tangent. Like 5 to 10 years ago, every single game that was coming out was an open world game. It was like everything
Oh
was
boy.
open world. Choose whatever you want, do whatever you
Oh no.
want, and all these
We're
different
going we're
things.
going crazy here.
The problem with open world games is that it's fun in its own thing, but you know what? Sometimes all you want to do have is a fracking very well designed World 1-1 in Mario. Sometimes you just want that very linear, like very like, oh my god, this is so smart how they wrote this. This is so smart how they designed this room. Portal. It's so smart how this puzzle was built. And it's a super linear story. And I think that as 5 to 10 years ago, calling a game linear was such a like
Insult.
insult. And I don't agree with that anymore. Like calling a game linear is just describing it, but a linear game can be just as good as an open-ended game.
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
feel like and I think that the reason the because I had this ending that was not satisfying, that was so boring, it does fight that. It does fight like, hey, Toby Fox, if your purpose was to not let like if your first playthrough of this game, you were supposed to get a neutral ending but not kill Papyrus, then make Papyrus incredibly difficult so that he captures you. Make it so that it's like a huge difficult like you're gonna need to use items, you're gonna need to like be min-maxing all your stuff to defeat them. Not only does it give a challenge for your genocide run, it also makes it so that hey, I need to teach you with a like hard stick, a slap on the wrist that hey, some characters you're not gonna want to defeat. There's some people that if you want to experience this to its fullest potential, you're gonna not want to defeat some people unless you are very, very adamant about defeating them.
Unless you're
Because
very determined.
unless you're very determined to defeat, yes, exactly. And because
Yeah.
this game Undertale is so open ended and has so many endings, you need to come to the realization or understand that unless you put a rut on the ground that pretty much like streamlines people into that first playthrough being a neutral ending that has a pretty positive experience, you're gonna end up with people going in the opposite direction in an open ending game, getting lost and getting bored and not wanting to play the game again. And I know that my version of the game is not the most popular. It's not like the one that
Yeah.
like most people, but I didn't try to kill Papyrus. Like it was I did not. I was just jumping and like not getting damaged, and I was like, okay, cool. Let me. I did some acts to him. I tried to talk with him. I tried to do X. And I just was like, oh, okay. I guess maybe he'll be like Undyne. I didn't think about
Yeah.
this while playing, but I was like, maybe it's like Undyne where after a few attacks something happens and new options come to me for act or whatever. So because there wasn't that visceral feedback of, hey, you're gonna need to do something different, or you're gonna need to, or like Papyrus remembered that, something more
I
visceral
yeah.
that streamlined me into because, like I said, I was trying to play this. If I was like playing it with the power of reset, where I remembered my previous two playthroughs, then yeah, I would have saved Papyrus because I would have been like, oh, I want to talk with Sans and I want to talk with Undyne. But this playthrough, since I was playing kind of like blindly, trying to play blindly, I was like, well, I'm assuming if I kill Papyrus, something different is going to happen. Something interesting is going to happen. And you know what? I've already experienced the keep Papyrus alive storyline. So how about I'm just going to kill him and see. That's got to
Right.
be. That's as easy of a choice to make through this game, so I did, and then the ending result was pretty lackluster. So it has the open world problem of the game is this
Now we're
open
getting
world
back there.
game
Okay.
is great if you follow the breadcrumbs, but if the breadcrumbs aren't there like good enough, then you're gonna have to be okay with some players going through this route that you did not intend and them not liking the game, you know?
I do know, and
So,
I understand what you're saying. I just honestly, it's one of those. It's hard for me to fully fully back, I guess,
mm,
your perspective or your argument. I think it's all salient, and I think everything you said, works, and I think it makes sense. My only position on it is that at the end of it all,
mm,
at the end of all of this, you still wanted to go back and play the game, but the only thing
mm.
that was holding you back is that you can't hold down B to run. And it's like,
Not just hold down B to run. There's three things: hold down B to run, that movement like dodging and stuff like that, that type of movement was kind of annoying, or jumping was kind of annoying whenever you had the blue heart portions, and the trial and error of nature of some of the monsters
right,
actions of monsters. You distill it down and it becomes, I feel like my time is being wasted.
right. You
But
felt like the game wasn't respectful of your time.
yes,
Okay.
and because I felt like the game wasn't respectful of my time, I'm not gonna respect it and give it my time. Like, you're not gonna respect my
Yeah,
time, I'm not gonna respect your time. Let's just,
I think that's fair.
this is a first date. It didn't work out. You're a lovely person, but I think it's not gonna work out. Let's just,
Did it feel like you were doing homework?
I af yeah, at some, I would say after I realized that there was absolutely nothing left for me after I killed Papyrus. So pretty much like maybe 3 hours in, I felt like that last hour and a half was such a slog. And
Right.
I got some level of like excitement back when I saw Photoshop Flowey, and I was like, "Ooh, this is so weird and like very Cthulhu, like very
Very.
like disgusting and all, very Mother 3 and all these things." And it kind of
Yeah.
made me like, but at that point it was too little, too late. It was like the "stay determined" in all caps at the end whenever you lose to Asgore. Um, I was like, man, if I was playing this normally, if I had played this the the normal route, or whatever we want to call it, then I bet this would have been a really cool thing. But as it is, I'm just trying to finish this. In fact, I actually was about to drop it. The Flowey battle, once it like killed me, I thought this the story what was trying to do was say give you a final boss that was impossible to beat unless you were love pain. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not about this. Once I realized, I reset it once to see, and I realized that it actually resets me a bit forward in the battle. It doesn't reset you all the way back at the beginning
Right.
of the battle. I was like, okay, the game actually wants me to follow this through. It doesn't want, it isn't, this isn't a punishment. This is actually part of the game. Um,
Yeah.
so,
So I I have I feel disappointed
mhm.
that you
I
didn't
feel
have a better time
disappointed.
with it. I know you do. And I
I
and I feel
really wanted
sad
to
that
enjoy
you
this
didn't like
game.
it more. I know. And I wanted you to enjoy it. I'm just perplexed cuz I'm just thinking like what's the intended first route through the game, right? Like what is probably the most typical way to play the game. So you're playing it, it's like a kind of
Mhm.
quirky, thoughtful, fun, weird looking Mother 3 Earthbound kind of RPG. You knew it was going to be quirky because that's how they sold it on the Kickstarter, and that's how Toby Fox sold it. And you get into it and you're playing it, and I have to imagine that just by like I when I tell you my buddy Brian, like I was like I called him and I was like I don't know how I feel about this. It seems like whatever. It just seems like it's just like trying too hard to be Earthbound, and I don't really get it. And he's like okay, like how far are you in? I was like I'm in the I'm like almost through Snowden. Like
Mm.
I'm like fucking around in Snowden. Like I have to do some stuff with Papyrus and Sans. And he's like, okay, so like the big trick of the game, the magic trick, is that you kill Toriel, and you're so upset by what you did, and you feel so bad about the choice you made in the game that you reset, but the game remembers, and you have to deal with it, and Flowey taunts you, and you have this like this aha moment
Mhm.
where this gotcha moment where you realize this game is operating on a different level.
Mhm.
And so this sort of begins this feedback loop of what else is this game doing that I'm not aware of that it's aware of me doing. Whether it's saving, like there's a number of times that the game auto saves and doesn't tell you,
Yeah.
where you if you die in a fight, but the last time they gave you a save point was a million rooms ago,
Mhm.
they will you won't realize it, but it happens a lot when you're in the core,
Yeah.
and it'll reset you to an elevator.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
And
think
it'll
that
skip like dialogue and everything.
right, and it knows that you played it before,
Mhm.
and it'll move. It happens a lot. I did the Metaton fight like 4 times,
Mhm.
and it does, and it like literally lets you like walk up when you're like you think that you could turn him around and flip the switch, and so you just get to flip the switch
Mhm.
right immediately when you reset that fight. And I'm trying to think about what the intended first route through is,
I
because it's not genocide. I cannot
definitely not.
express to you it is the lengths that so just to explain a genocide route
Mhm.
really quickly. To do a genocide route, you have to kill every single
Yeah.
monster in every area,
Mhm.
right? And once you do that, the sound changes, the music changes, it gets super creepy. All of the NPCs have text with you that didn't exist before, that's hyper aware of you killing every monster. When you walk through the first area where there's those 3 froggets that teach you about the game,
Mhm.
once you've killed every enemy in that area, they're gone.
Yeah.
They are no longer there for you to talk to. The anytime you get into a random encounter, it just says no one came. The shops are empty except for Temmie.
Mhm.
Um, Weirdly
Tammy
enough,
is
I think
eternal.
Temmie is eternal and doesn't care. The turtle won't talk to you,
Mhm.
or has different text with you and calls you like a villain, calls you bullshit, like all of these
Mhm.
things. But you have to sit there, and they call it the Chara dance, where you just have to just walk. You just end up walking permanently into a wall, and it looks like your sprite's like doing a stupid dance, because you just need to trigger these fights. Like you have to go so far out of your way. You have to make the game so unbearably boring to play
Mhm.
to do a genocide run that there's no way that this could be on the
Yeah.
table as your first run. You have to be aware that this is something that you can do.
Yeah.
That it's in conversation with the game. And then the game shows you a pacifist run. Toriel teaches you you don't fight. We don't fight here. You never hit. You have to talk when you fight the dummy the first
Mhm.
time. And if you don't kill the dummy that you fight in the junkyard has different text with you
Yeah.
as well. So the game's
Which, by the
doing this
way, I
thing
killed the
where
dummy, which I think is the only the first one, the inanimate one,
yeah,
is apparently the only dummy you can kill that doesn't count against your pacifist.
yes, yes,
Which is good because it's you as an RPG player, you do this like, oh, it's a dummy, let me just swing at it or whatever, Like,
yeah.
so I like that. I like that a lot. I
I
think
just yeah,
from my experience playing 3 neutral runs, I I don't think those first 2 other runs, I never realized that the game was remembering those 2 other runs.
mm-hmm.
This run, I realized much later, like maybe like 3 hours in, 4 hours in. It took me a while to realize, oh, it actually is remembering some stuff that I did in other battles and then I lost and I got all these things. Having had that experience, I mean, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but I think it's Papyrus. Papyrus is your last, is the king. Like, let's say you kill Toriel, you feel
Yes,
bad, you reset, you get told blah blah blah, you realize, oh, something is crazy, or you play through the game and you're like, oh, I feel bad, but I'm gonna play through it because Toriel is like an hour in, so it's not trivial to just reset the game.
yeah,
So I think it's just as acceptable for a player to kill Toriel and move on, kill Toriel, restart, get mocked, move on, and or spare her your first time and move on. I think Papyrus, it's such a different, different, like genocide run is so purposeful. Pacifist run is so purposeful And neutral
Right.
run is not. Neutral run, you're just going with emotions. And I feel like that neutral run, I'm surprised when I was reading online about the different endings. I'm surprised that the one that I got doesn't really have a name for it. It feels like mine should have been bad neutral versus good neutral. I
It's just like
it,
it just seems like killing Papyrus if you're in a neutral run is an extremely reasonable thing to do.
yeah. But the thing, yeah, it's super reasonable thing to
And
do.
so it's weird to me that more people haven't run into
Yeah.
your playthrough,
Yeah.
your ending, and they've because I just feel
I
like
guess
when
I'm too much of a gamer. I'm too much of a
Yeah,
gamer. Didn't
yes.
get captured. What the heck?
Yeah, you're way too much of a gamer. That's it. You're an epic gamer. You had too many epic gamer moments.
I had too many
and-
monster drinks while playing monster drinks and
Yeah,
Doritos.
I mean, it's Toby Fox didn't make this game with gaming chairs in mind.
Yeah, right.
That's just it. He just didn't know.
I
but
say while I sit on my crappy free gifted.
then you should have had.
garbage.
Then you should have lost. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess it's just for me what
But
what's
on-
confusing is that it just seems it just doesn't seem like you. I just can't imagine that you like found like this like 1 in a million ending.
maybe it's not 1 in a million. Maybe a lot of people have gotten my ending, but if you get my ending, like I said, you're done after an hour after
Yeah.
defeating Papyrus. And if you're not gonna like, if you're not a fan, you're not gonna like. It's so. If I didn't have this podcast to talk to you about this, I probably would have just told Lauren and just I wouldn't have gone online and been like, yeah, this game is bad. I wouldn't have gone on Steam and done a thumbs
Right.
down. Like, I think that it's just not a majority, but a sizable amount of people have killed Papyrus, play for another hour, and get bored with the game and just never play again. And just
Yeah.
that was 3 hours of my life. That was like a movie long. I'm good. I'm out. And that's why
it's
you
like
don't.
watching Oppenheimer. It's still boring.
Yeah. Oh god, let's not. I
Let's not do
agree.
movies
So
unless it's Advent Children.
unless
That
it's
doesn't
Advent
count.
Children, we gotta play it. We gotta play Advent Children. We gotta play Advent Children by having a controller while watching it and acting like we're doing.
Yeah, I'll hold
stuff.
one while I
Um,
I'll hold one while I watch it.
So I think it might not be as rare as we think of it. Maybe it is something that a lot of people go through, but most people drop it after.
Yeah, maybe
after.
maybe that's the case. I could also see wanting to go back and like figure out like, hey, I could see social pressure driving you to play the game again.
Perhaps
too.
maybe when it was coming out and everybody was screaming praises.
It was everything everybody was talking about.
But that's the
yeah.
problem, right? Like whenever you have a game that is so popular and everybody is talking so positively, there's always going to be a counterculture to
Of course.
of it.
Of course.
So I think that that would have played against people trying it again, right? Like I'm playing it at this point in time where everybody is singing its praises. I play it, it's not for me. I'm probably in that mindset and more likely to just join the counterculture of being like, yeah, it's not that good of a game versus just being like, I wonder why people like this so much. Let me give it another try. Like that only happens now, right? Like 5 years divorced from all the like craziness.
Right.
I
Right.
go back to it and be like, let me see, maybe it was different. Maybe that's why I'm excited about playing Metal Gear Solid 2. Because I'm excited to like, I didn't like that game when it came out, but was I just part of like, was I just not in the mind?
Was I a hater?
Was I a hater?
Find out at
honestly,
11.
that game was, everybody was a hater in that game, but that was,
Is that the game with Raiden?
oh boy. You know?
Oh, now I know what we're in for.
Oh.
Okay. I don't want to get too off track here.
So, yeah.
So I mean,
I think having Papyrus and the fact that Papyrus doesn't kill you, I think is a good hint as to this is what the game is supposed to be. The game is supposed to be that you're supposed to live, you're supposed to get captured, and because after you get captured, it's easier to do the mercy. Because at that point, you have less health. I guess you can get a bunch of potions to like raise your health again or whatever for the next time you fight him. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure there's other options in your act this time around that like the second
maybe.
time you fight him, if you fight him after you got captured. So there is
Yeah,
some forward momentum.
I
Like,
think
oh,
so.
something like as a
Something's
player,
different here.
yeah, as a player, I get killed, I get captured instead of getting killed. I'm like, oh, this was a, I would have thought this is
This is
a
scripted.
scripted death.
Yeah. I think I mean, so we've been here for an hour and 25 minutes
Oh
now,
boy.
and I don't think I'm certainly not going to convince you to change your opinion, nor would I try
Mhm.
really. I do respect, and I am sorry you didn't have a better
Yeah.
time with it. I know you wanted
I'll
to,
still have memories of
but
those first two playthroughs. I liked going on a date with Papyrus.
well,
I
in
liked.
5 years we'll revisit the game, and I'll make sure that you don't kill Papyrus. I'll tell you. I'll leave you a note. There'll be a letter on a sealed envelope like underneath something that you have to move in 5 years, and it'll be like don't kill Papyrus.
How do
But
you? Okay, so 5 years down the road, Jason, you're trying to convince me to play this again, or Lauren, you're trying to convince her to play the game because she is one of those people that I said play the first hour or two, and if you're not into it, then you're probably not gonna be into it for the rest of the game. And she was not into it, and she just dropped it. She was like, "Yeah, I'm
right.
not endeared by these characters. I'm not like into this." So
It's I guess if I were to try and elevator pitch or sell the game, I don't think it needs to be done,
mm,
but if this okay, so my partner Aislin's never played it, and if I wanted to get her to play the game, I would say the characters are super quirky, they're very silly. I would say for the most part, the game's kind of easy to play.
mm,
It doesn't require a lot of technical skill. I mean, the bullet hell of it all, it can be difficult, but it also doesn't really ask you to be you don't you move so slow that you can only be so dexterous
yeah,
with it. I would say that it's a little bit easier to play in terms of getting involved with the game. So there's not like a huge difficulty curve like that. And I would just say like I really love the characters and the story. It's for me that's what kept me going was because I the first 2 hours of the game felt like homework to me. I was like, okay, it's quirky, I get it. It's very mid 2000s humor.
mm,
It's like super self aware, whatever. I'm like I've read House of Leaves. I've done the metafictive stuff. I know what we're talking about here, but the way that I just fell in love with these characters, and I was like, oh, I get to date Papyrus. This is so stupid. Like this is so dumb. But then I was like going through the whole thing. I'm like, this is kind of like I love this guy. I love this
mm,
stupid little
mm,
skeleton and his brother Sans and the like there is certainly a narrative and a Ludo narrative magic trick where Undertale hides the fact that you're playing it until it pulls back the curtain and shows you that you and Flowey are really the same person, just sort of foiling and mirroring each
mm,
other across actual time. Flowey's been there for forever and now hates everything because they don't feel. And you can become like Flowey
mm.
in that way. You can become empty. The beginning of a genocide run when you first meet Flowey after killing Toriel and everything's dead in the ruins. Flowey says, "Oh, you're just like me. You're empty inside too." And the the real trick in the game is that all these characters are so stupid and silly and like there you have no reason to really fall in love with them the way that I did.
Mm.
Like it just happens over time. And my experience with Undertale was such that when I finished the neutral ending, I spared everything and everyone. I had 0 kills on my stats at the end of the game, and I spared Asgore and I spared Flowey. And the game ends in a neutral ending at that point. And Sans calls you and says, "You made a snowman very happy." I still had my snowman
I
teeth,
hate it.
and and then he says, "I think if you were going to try it again, I would talk to Papyrus and Undyne and see what they have to say." And then I did that, and I was like, "Oh, it'll just be like two quick
It's
conversations. They'll join me in battle." I didn't realize it's a whole other ending of it's like a whole additional three
yeah,
hours
the
of the
secret
game,
lab.
and
Yeah.
then you go to the true lab, and I just found like the whole like every time I turned a corner on the game, it showed me that it could do something else. It showed me that it had way more depth of
Mm,
narrative experience and just
yeah.
play, right? Where the True Lab is so sad
Yeah.
and so creepy at the same time. The game does this really cool story building moment where everything that's very scary is also very sad, and everything that's very sad is also very silly. And so it kind of rolls these aspects of the whole thing is predicated on this the death of these children of um Azrael and
Charla?
um
Charla?
Chara.
Chara?
Is it Chara? I think it's Chara. Of these children and what that means for the game. And it's so sad, but at the same time, everything's so couched in this sweet humor. And then there's these really dark, scary moments of experimentation and death and all these things. But then, then we take responsibility for our actions. And it has these moments where it's constantly layering these lessons that it's trying to show the characters developing through and learning from, despite them being silly, stupid, goofy kind of guys. And I was shocked because usually something like that isn't, I need a little bit more to relate to a
Mhm.
character to want to follow them more. And it really didn't take much for me to recognize, like, oh my God, this game is doing something that I wasn't expecting it to do. So it twisted my expectations. And then when I was ready for it, it still continued to surprise me with its charm.
Mhm.
And I think that's really what sells me on Undertale, is that it's so unbelievably charming when it wants to be, and it is so deeply disturbing when it wants to be, and it can hold both of those realities side by side. And
Yeah.
I was just really impressed with the way that Toby Fox and his team were able to create something that felt so visually unique and also extremely respectful of its origins, of Earthbound, Mother 3, of Super Mario RPG, Dragon Quest, all of these things. And it was a game that I feel like is very much in reply and in conversation with the 21st century gamer,
Mhm.
with the person who's playing the game, in the same way that Earthbound is in reply and in conversation with Dragon Quest. Super traditional RPG. It's like on rails. There are no decisions you're making. You cast sizzle and it sizzles the enemy, and you fight the stupid metal slimes, and you do like you follow it, you go have to go save this person, you have to go get this MacGuffin, and then that'll give you this power so that you can go save this other person so that you can go defeat this bad guy. And you do all these things to layer on your experience in Dragon Quest. And then Earthbound zooms out and says, "This is all really stupid. What if we were slightly aware that the way that stories are told is too linear?" And then Earthbound creates this somewhat non-linear experience of gameplay, and then layers on all this sort of like self-aware quirk and the self-aware humor onto it. And then you see Toby Fox do the same thing where he's like, I know that Earthbound was doing this in conversation with other RPGs in Japan at the time. What if I did that with other players, other developers, other gamers in 2015, in the 2020s, whatever, in the 2010s, the aughts, as it were. And Undertale is this game that is in conversation with the player, who is by all means somebody who is very much inundated in a world where at the time where media was very cut and dry. Media was not willing to take a lot of risks, I think, in your games, in your popular games in 2015. I bet you if we looked up a list, none of them are like really pushing the boundaries of what it means to game, what it means to be somebody who's playing a video game, how it works. Your film media. I mean, we're in the midst of like Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff, so very much no risk taking in movies. And I think Toby Fox creates Undertale and says, I can give you a somewhat traditional experience, but I will show you that if you can just stretch, if you can just observe and try to play this game from a different angle, I'll show you that you can have a completely unique experience. You can do something that you've maybe never done before, where you can play a traditional RPG and you can learn to love these characters just like I learned to love my Chronos and my Robos and my Frogs in Chrono Trigger, I can learn to love Sans and Undyne and that little fish guy that follows you around, and the dog that steals the legendary artifact and leaves dog residue in my inventory, and all these like silly crazy things that just made me cackle. And I can learn to love them just like I learned to love my Lucas and my Robos, and create this experience that is so undeniably fresh while at the same time so respectful of, I think, the source material, but also what it expects of the player. Because at any point in time you can walk away from the game and you can say, this is a video game just like your experience was, and I'm done with it, and it has achieved for me what it's going to achieve for me, and I maybe didn't have the experience I wanted, or maybe what was intentional, but at any given time in that reading, I think you are still within the bounds of what the game was expecting you to do or could have expected you to do, which is you bounced off of it. I don't think there's a world in which Toby Fox designs Undertale and says everybody's going to get it. No artist makes art thinking that everybody's going to love it. We make art and you just make it despite the fact that some people aren't going to get it or they won't jive with it. But the ludonarrative creativity in Undertale couches your experience within its own world, and that's the sort of really interesting metafictive thing that Undertale is doing that really sort of drew me in, is that however I deal with this game, it's going to ask me to couch it within its experience. You didn't like it, you killed Papyrus, you had this thing. Well, the game just says you chose evil, you chose negativity, you're a villain, you killed somebody who didn't need to be killed, you're empty inside partially, like you have the determination to do these things, but you chose not to, and so your experience was worse for it. Now, I'm not saying that that's a catch-all save for, as a designer of games, as a developer, there are design rules that should be followed to create and foster experiences. But this is the trick of postmodern and metafictive writing, where if it doesn't work, it's kind of, you're still kind of in the space that it's created.
Yeah, and my problem with it was that I don't agree with it, right?
That's a very reasonable take.
I don't agree with the game's take from a, if you killed Papyrus, we're gonna make the game boring for you now, like, you know. So it's like, okay, I guess, fuck me, I guess.
Well, yeah, and it's not, but it's not that we're going to make the game boring for you. You just killed a linchpin character in the story, and there's nothing that happens without Papyrus.
That's fine.
Is what we learned, right? Is that if you kill Papyrus in a neutral run, what ends up happening is Papyrus drives so much of the story that you don't even, I would not have guessed if you told me last night when I was playing the game that killing Papyrus would do that. I'm like,
me neither.
The fuck does Papyrus do?
I thought I was gonna go and still with Undyne. Maybe Undyne is like, oh, where did Papyrus go? Do you know? And that maybe you can lie or say yes or no, like do something, and then there's a different story of like that is interesting, that it's not as good. Maybe.
But you still did everything with the doctor, with the professor, right?
Yeah, the professor. Yeah. She followed me, and I did the Metaton thing. I mean, the professor is kind of probably the weakest character for me, out of all of them. So the spider character is such a cool design. She's only there for like 5 to 10 minutes, but I loved her. I loved how each of her eyes blink separately.
Yeah,
oh, this is. I love her like little dress. It's like, oh, she's adorable. I can't kill you. Come on, she's great.
That's so funny.
So yeah, I kind of feel like that was a good ending, a good ending thesis from you, Jason. So I don't think I want to.
Okay,
murky
I think
it,
it's a good point.
You know,
I think let's use this as a sign. Let's wrap up.
Yeah.
I loved Undertale. I don't think I'll play it again anytime soon, but I loved Undertale. And Fran, you wished
I could have
loved
it
more.
I wish I had finished it the first time I played it. Because if I had finished it the first time I played it, probably this playthrough would have been boring, but it would have been like nobody plays the kill papyrus. Like nobody does that, and
Right.
versus this
Right.
time where it was like, no, it's pretty easy to just do it. I will say I haven't played any of Deltarune, and
Me
I
either.
do like the world. Maybe
Me
Deltarune will
too.
be my type of game. Maybe Deltarune will fix a lot of the issues that I'm having of like it's too slow or it's too X, Y, and Z, and so maybe
Yeah.
it's worth
I,
it to try it out.
I'm super interested in checking out Deltarune, if only to see where does Toby Fox go after Undertale. I think as a developer, it would be pretty. I think it would be reasonable to be intimidated
Mhm.
by Undertale's success and having to follow
I
it
am
up.
surprised that he decided to make another game in the Undertale universe. Like
Yeah,
it's such huge boots to to fill, you
Phil.
know? Like it feels like
Yeah.
it should have been something like I'm just gonna do something completely different so that way it doesn't get compared as much. But
I thought he should have made a Wordle clone next, just to really palate cleanse, you know. Um,
uh,
But anyway, I appreciate your I appreciate what you added here, Fran, and I appreciate your takes. I know it's it's not easy to talk about a game that you weren't in love with, but I thought you did so in a really respectful way, and I appreciate that
I
that
honestly,
that we that here.
I like the fact that you felt kind of like that with not to this level that I did with Ocarina of Time, but you really did feel like, at least from our conversations, that it wasn't like a watershed moment for you that it blew your mind. It was like, oh yeah, this I understand it and it was fun.
Yes,
So I'm
I
glad.
think that's really the case
So I'm glad that
for us.
it kind of got vice versa, got flipped around for Undertale.
Yeah, we're the same person but different.
It's
Exactly. So
we're not so
we'll
different, you and I, Spider
we're
Man.
not. Fran, thank you so much for joining me today talking about Undertale. I always appreciate that we can have different opinions and still get to the meat and core of everything, and we can do so in a way that is, I think, respectful to the games and to each other. So, thank you as always to my effervescent, bubbly co-host Francisco Martin.
Thank you.
Fran, where can they find you on socials?
You can find me on social at el_fantastico on Threads, not on the website formerly known as Twitter anymore. Well, I'm still on there, but I just don't use it ever.
Yeah,
Or you can find me on Twitch. Again, el_fantastico. And if you find somebody on Discord named Fantastico, that's me. So say hi.
awesome. And you can find me at Conwobi, KONWOBI on Twitter. I won't call it anything else. You can also, easiest place to find me would be on my blog, useyouritems.wordpress.com. You can also email either myself or Fran at useyouritems@gmail.com. And we'll probably have to spin up a Discord at some point.
Yeah.
But that honestly, with the way social media is going, that's kind of my preference
Yeah.
anyway, where I don't want to use any of these things. I'm not making a thread. So anyway, you can find me there. You can find Fran at his spots. We might do a Twitch sometime soon. But thank you so much for joining us.
Have a great night, and don't forget to use your items.
Yeah.